So this morning we spoke a little bit about capability, strategy, and performance. I'm going to talk a little bit about Cmmi version 2.0, but my key focus is going to be on the relationship between performance improvement and compliance. And we talk a lot about these certifications, kind of ticking the box and getting these stamps on our organizations. And I will propose to you, what may seem controversial, that if you pursue performance as your goal, compliance will follow. But if you pursue compliance as your goal, you may not achieve performance. So why this tension? The culture of continuous improvement goes back to really the beginning of the scientific method, right? With Galileo conducting experiments, following on with Newton structuring the scientific method. In industry, we see it applied by Walter Schuhart, who proposed a cycle of inspection, of building, inspection and feedback from the market. This cycle he proposed, he said, you can think of it as the scientific method applied in industry. That's his student, Deming, took this same cycle concept on and communicated it in the ways that we've seen it as plan, do, check, act, those sorts of cycles. Now, this is the cycle from the lean startup, which is very popular in Silicon Valley right now. Build, measure, learn. It's the same cycle, right? It's just the cycle of empirical learning. We have a hypothesis, we validate our hypothesis, and then we redesign our approach based on what we've learned, right? In point of fact, what we've learned from the lean movement is this cycle, this decision cycle, that in business, the goal is to be inside your competitor's decision cycle. If you can execute that cycle more quickly than your competitors, you'll have more options. You're buying optionality. You will have more frequent decisions. You'll have more frequent maneuvers, and you can encircle and entrap your components. This is the basis of maneuver warfare, which is the current doctrine in the military. So you see, this all goes back to just scientific method and the quality movement. Now, in compliance, organizations sometimes aren't interested in continuous improvement. They aren't interested in the continuous learning. Sometimes they're interested in the mark, the achievement that they can display to their customers, right? And the consequence is, in some of these cases, it is possible to pass an audit and yet not really internalize the culture of continuous improvement. Right? So it's possible to dress up like a Lusitano, but not really have the performance or the culture there. And I would say even with existing governmental regulatory regimes, this is an actual report from a major medical device company in the US. These are two independent divisions within the company. These are their Cmmi gap analyses. Both of these organizations had been audited by the government regulator. They both had ISO compliance. They had government compliant, regulatory compliance, and ISO compliance. And so the senior executives believed they were essentially the same organization. But you can see from the Cmmi gap analysis, you're looking at two very different levels of capability, right? So there's a hazard, there's a risk when we take a box-checking approach to compliance. And there's another tension. With some organizations, when they achieve compliance, they do the thing that will kill any organization. They say, don't touch anything. Don't change a thing. We passed the appraisal, we passed the audit. Whatever we do, we don't want to change anything, right? Which which is a culture of continuous improvement, will be a culture of continuous innovation, right? And in point of fact, when I talk to people who tell me, we talk about process, and they'll say, oh, process is just a lot of bureaucratic red tape. And I'll say, well, no, what that tells you is that bureaucratic red tape, that bad process, may have been a good idea at some point in time, but the business and conditions have changed. And you haven't adapted your processes to meet the business conditions. Now, I compare it to a website. I say, if you put your website up in 1995 and never touched it again, would you be surprised if it didn't really fit the needs of the market anymore? Well, similarly, with your processes. Now, with our website, we're used to it. We have user testing, we're doing A/B testing, we're validating our hypotheses on what the shortest, most effective path to usability is constantly. And yet, for some reason, we think that we shouldn't take the same point of view in terms of the effectiveness of our processes, right? So I would say if we treated the UX of our software the same way we treat our processes, they would look like they did in 1995. Right? So the CMMI with version 2.0, our goal has been to strengthen cultures of continuous improvement by focusing on business performance. As I'd mentioned before, we've designed the new framework to continuously leverage best practice so we can continuously update it. It's available online. We're building in specific guidance, which is something that we had not done in the past in terms of how to use specific methods, such as agile methods. We've improved the performance of the benchmarking capability and provided guidance on adoption, sort of what's the speed to impact. Now, someone asked me, well, if I'm on version 1.3, why would I change? And I'd say, well, if you want your organization to look like your website in 1995, don't change. But let your competitors change. From a practical point of view, for engineers, the new version is simpler, easier to understand, and it speaks in their language. It focuses on why we do the things we do. What's the business value? And as I said, the agile guidance is provided. For middle managers, it's more comprehensive, and there are fewer practice areas. We reduced the model 64%. So without reducing, actually increasing its scope and effectiveness, we've reduced the content 64%. So it makes it easier to maintain because there are fewer practice areas, and this results in a lower total cost of ownership. And as I said, the appraisals are less disruptive to organizations. And for senior management, the focus is on building capability to drive business performance, which is ultimately the results that people are focusing on. So as I had mentioned earlier, the CMMI is about enabling an organization's operation to be aligned with its goals to elevate performance. And what is the role of compliance? Compliance should be the exhaust that follows from that. Right? It should come out by doing things right. That should be what follows on. So thank you.